A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Jonathan from Crowe, Singapore, and welcome to a webinar on recent tax developments in Indonesia. Our presenter this morning, Ibu Sri Wahyuni Sujono, will be discussing the key tax developments in Indonesia, including the changing of individual, corporate, and value-added tax rates, as well as the updating of tax avoidance prevention instruments, among others. You may submit your questions for our presenter at any time during the session in the tab Q&A found at the bottom of your screens. Our presenter will endeavor to answer your questions at our Q&A segment towards the end of today's session. Also, if you would like to request for a copy of the presentation and the recording for this webinar, you may do so in the evaluation form that will appear at the end of the session. Our presenter for this morning, Ibu Sri Wahyuni, has over 26 years of experience in tax consulting and is currently the head of the tax division at Crowe, Indonesia. Sri has been involved in the restructuring and mergers and acquisitions of major banks and companies where she dealt almost exclusively with MNCs. Her experience has led to expertise in areas such as tax structured derivatives, tax planning, and tax restructuring. Sri is also currently the chairman of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce Taxation Committee and a member of the Indonesian Tax Consultant Association Supervisory Board and a member of the Entrepreneur Organization Indonesia Board. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome your presenter for this morning, Sri. Sri, please.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to greet all of you in a good health. Salam sehat dan sejahtera. So many changes in our environment and the way we live and do business, and so the tax regulations in Indonesia. We have to adopt and transform to the changes and domestic and global trends. Today, we will briefly discuss on the recent harmonization of tax regulation law, or what is called HPP, Harmonisasi Peraturan Perpajakan, Law Number 7, 2021. And some of the provision we are still waiting for the implementing regulations. So without further ado, the agenda for today, we will cover briefly 5 main points. Okay, next slide, please. 5 brief main points. We will cover the rate, the VAT, income tax, and international tax. And what is we are waiting for the tax voluntary disclosure program, VDP, global tax consensus, the latest trend, and what is hot topics is the carbon tax and custom and excise law. Okay. Next. So this harmonization of tax regulation law has been signed by our president on October 29, 2021. However, please pay attention when it is applicable. So it's not all the same. For the value-added tax and the carbon tax, it will be applicable starting April 1st, 2022. For the income tax law, fiscal year 2022, for the voluntary disclosure program, or we just call it tax amnesty 2, that is on January 1st up to June 2022. And the general provision and tax procedure law mainly govern about the sanctions, the penalty, that is on October 29, 2021, as well as carbon and excise law. So please pay attention when this law is start applicable. So in order to have the correct tax treatment. Next. Okay, so why lately the government of Indonesia very aggressive and a lot of changes? Well, of course, every country needs the money because of the COVID and the situation at this moment. So this is one way to expand the tax base and then to address the high tax expenditure and improve growth and accelerate economic recovery for sure. and realizing a fair and equitable taxation system. So there is many new trends on our taxation system. And the most important also, improve voluntarily compliance. So this is the way that the government wants. Is not actually the main intention is not to punish. So this is to make that if everybody can voluntarily comply, then it will be better because the sanction also will be lower. Okay, let's start. Next slide, please. Okay, this is with the first rate. What to pay attention on this? This is on the individual income tax rate, which is the main difference is on the lowest bracket. Before is up to 50 million. It's about $5,000. The rate is 5%. And then upgrade into 60 million, around 6,000 Sing dollar, the rate is 5%. So some of the employee may experience a slightly higher take-home pay because of these changes. And also to improve the fairness with the people having the higher income. So the bracket for the previous one, that is maximum is 500 million. It's about 50,000 Sing dollar a year at the tax rate of 30%. And under the new law, that is they add the new bracket, 500 million up to 5 billion. So 50,000 up to 5 million, approximately Sing dollar. The rate is 30%. And for the people having higher income, Sing dollar 5 million, the rate is 35%. And then please note, this is the change of the rate. Our non-taxable income, PTKP, so far remain the same. So what is pay attention is the new bracket and then the adding of the new rate, the higher rate for the higher income. Okay. The next also that the government tried to improve our small, micro, medium, because 90% of our economy also coming from small, micro, medium enterprise. This is again for the individual taxpayers who have certain gross turnover. The gross turnover of 500 million per year, equivalent approximately 50,000 Sing dollar. There is no tax, only 0%, well, no tax. But if above 500 million per year, the final tax of 0.50%. What is qualified under small, micro, and medium enterprises? That is regulated under Government Regulation number 23, 2018. For the individual taxpayer who have certain gross turnover of 4.8 billion maximum, that is about 4.8 million Sing dollar, that can be subject to this special tax treatment. This is the government incentive also to promote the small, micro, medium enterprises in Indonesia. Next slide. The next is this one for the corporate income tax. This is the income tax for corporate taxpayer as well as permanent establishment. Before we heard that the government planned to reduce to 20%, but it is decided now 22%, remain the same, 2022, 22%. And then also, this is the existing, just to remind, for the corporate taxpayer with a gross turnover of 50 billion may still receive the incentive of 50% tax reduction that is governed under Article 31E of Income Tax Law. That is still, the old one still there. Okay, we are updating so many rates. The next rates is for the VAT. For the VAT, this based on the study, at this moment our VAT rate is at 10%. that is considered low among other countries. So starting April 1st, 2022, that is 11% for taxable goods as well as services. And then for the 2025, that is planned to be 12%. For the export, remain the same, 0%. Well, of course, on the VAT, this is something that need to be planned as well, because of course it will impact on the cash flow, especially the companies that is always suffer of a payment. And also at the end of the day, also the price increase on the supply chain, as well as, of course, by end consumer. So that will be the impact. So better to know and then to plan early. Then the next rates. This one, so many complaints coming in that to get the justice, to go to the disputes under previous regulations, then the sanction is 50% during objection and the appeal 100%. That is a lot of taxpayer consider is so big, so that if they lost the case, the penalty is very high. So hearing that, it is changed under the new law. If we go on the objection, the sanction or the penalty is 30%. And the appeal is 60%. But what is new that is governed, if we go further to the tax reconsideration to Mahkamah Agung, then it's the same 60%. Before it's not governed, it means 0%. So this is also to increase the higher chance for the taxpayer to seek for the justice and the legal certainty. So 30% and 60% up to the Supreme Court level into the tax reconsideration. Okay. Next. This is something to actually still almost the same, but there is the different. So for tax purpose, every words we have to pay attention. The words of the exceptions and the word of exemption, it will have a different tax treatment. So this one is the VAT exception. What is except is on the food and drinks served at hotel, restaurant, stall, and not to include catering service, and the gold bar for foreign exchange reserve, state, and securities. And then for the exemption, the different later into the detail technical is whether we have to issue the tax invoice or not. Because if we do not issue the tax invoice or wrong, that will be subject to penalty. So next is on the exemption. On the exemption is on the daily necessities like the rice, sugar, eggs, medical health service that is on the hospital. But when we go to the drugstore, a different slightly. Social service, postates, financial service remain the same, like bank services, insurance, that is the same, and the education, non-advertising broadcasting, labor service, public money transfer service. So basically still remain the same. This is the big picture. So the difference is on the classification, exception, and exemption. Okay, next. Now this one, a lot of us before have the tax planning using this benefit in kind of things. Kenikmatan natura fringe benefit. Under the old regulation on the left side, non-taxable, non-deductible. Mostly, for example, the company give the housing to the expatriate, then it will be non-taxable at the hands of the expatriate if in the form of the benefit in kind, but non-deductible in the company. So that is a different rate for the individual last time 30% and for the corporate 25%. That is last time. Now the new regulation becoming taxable and deductible. So any benefit in kind, benefits, fringe benefit giving to the employee or the individual that is taxable at the hands of the individuals and deductible at the hands of corporate. There is a difference of the rates. Okay. However, there is still benefit in kind, not considered as taxable income, but that is specific regulated for the food and beverage provided for all employees, usually cafeteria or canteen at the factory. Benefit in kind on the remote area, certain areas to be regulated. For the implementation of work for safety, usually uniform, seragam, those kind of things. And then benefit in kind provided from state budget and benefit in kind for certain types and threshold to be regulated. Okay, so next one. Now, this one for the depreciation and amortization. The government of Indonesia promote what is the development of the infrastructure and also some businesses that have the longer useful life on the permanent buildings as well as intangible assets, which have a useful life more than 20 years. For example, toll road concession rights. So under the previous regulations, whether the commercial useful life more than 20 years, but for tax purposes, for the permanent buildings is maximum 20 years. And for the intangible assets, maximum is group 4 for the 20 years. But under the new regulation, if the building and the intangible assets have the useful life of more than 20 years, then maybe depreciate or amortize using the actual useful life based on taxpayers' bookkeeping. The detail of this regulation will be governed further by the government regulation. So this one, promote this long-term more than 20 years and heavy investment. Then the other interesting things. This one, the government has been for so long try to incorporate the national identity number, what is called KTP, Kartu Tanda Penduduk, Nomor Identitas Kependudukan atau NIK, as tax ID number for individual taxpayers, so that this becoming the single identity. Before that, we have the we have our national identity number. We have a different tax ID number, but this one will be is incorporated into one single identity number. And also for the proxy, the taxpayer proxy. This one now the proxy can be exercised by anyone, provided they have competency in tax. Will be required certain levels of education, certification, and or coaching by associations or the Minister of Finance. An exception is given if we give the proxy to a husband, wife, or blood relative, or relationship by marriage of 2 degrees. 2 degrees is defined by, for example, the children, parents, and grandparents. That is considered 2 degrees up. 2 degrees down, grandparents, parents, and then the grandson or granddaughter. That is what is meant by 2 degrees, 2 derajat. Next slide. Now, other new things also, the tax criminal law enforcement, adding the power for the tax investigator to freeze and or confiscate assets as collateral for recovery loss of state revenue. Before, who can freeze and confiscate? Only police or kejaksaan. Now even the tax investigator can do that. And then the new concept, also the ultimum remedium. Ultimum remedium is that our government actually does not interested to put people on the prison. Prison also full and then cost to give foods and then boardings. So actually, as long as the taxpayer willing to pay, so that they extend even until the hearing stage, even until the pengadilan, taxpayer is still given the opportunity to repay the loss to state revenue by paying the taxes and the sanctions as a consideration for prosecuted without being sentenced to imprisonment. So, yeah, it's not interested to put people in the jail actually. As long as you pay, then everything can be settled. This is the new concept, ultimum remedium. Then, on the international tax side, our government is getting more sophisticated and then try to comply and adopt with the new international trends and updates. Then this is substance over the form principle. Well, of course, this is the old principle, but it is being emphasized again in the elucidation of Article 18. It is the substance, the elements to look for the substance over form. Sometimes it's the physical presence, no treaty abuse. Who is the ultimate beneficial ownership? Is not easy, but yeah, it's that. And the economic activities. Sometimes the physical presence is here, but the economic activities at the other countries. So one way to avoid tax is to make the transaction that are not in accordance with the facts, which is contrary with the substance over the form principles. So for example, where is the recognition of the economic substance rather than the structure? Okay, next. Then, if you remember, there is the limitation of the interest deductibility. Under the previous income tax law, that is what is called debt to equity ratio 4:1. If the loan is 4 and the equity is 1. If in excess for that, so that the interest expense in excess becoming non-deductible. So under the new law that it is introduced the new method. For example, a company have the taxable income of 50. And then the net interest expense 40. Depreciation expense and amortization, let's say 10. So a tax EBITDA is 100. And there is the fixed ratio 30%. This is just for illustration purpose. The rate is 30% because it will be governed later. So the maximum interest deduction is 30. So what is allowed is only 30. And the 10, the different 40 and 30 is 10, is non-deductible interest expense. That is the new will be introduced, and also maybe another methods that will be introduced. This is also to follow the new trends of the global taxation. Next. And also another thing, that is the TP methods for the determination of market price. Before, what is allowed is 5. We have CAP, RPM, CPM, PSM, TNMM. Now under the new law, adding 3 more: comparable uncontrolled transaction, usually for the royalty, For the tangible, intangible asset valuation method, for example, for the sale and purchase of the assets to the related party, business valuation method, maybe for the share valuation, if want to sell the company to the related party. So this is also to allow the taxpayer to defend themselves with additional methods. Next. This is on the new benchmarking. The new benchmarking. For so long, for 1 decade, 2 decades, or even longer than that, the tax office, the government of Indonesia always curious, how come if the company always reporting the losses, but they can still survive 10 years, 20 years? How come if the company does not making profit for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but they still operating? Well, it becoming questions. Sometimes that's true, and especially during this COVID, a lot of companies will suffer the reduce of the minimum operating profit or even in the loss position. So to address that issue, so this is also governed because, well, of course, the tax office does not like the company is in a loss position because, of course, there is no tax to be paid, right? So that is also the source of the dispute. So with this, that they allow the benchmarking for the taxpayer who report minimum operating profit compared to the financial performance of other taxpayer in the same business line, or unreasonably report the operating losses, even though the taxpayer already have commercial sales for 5 years that is still in a loss. Then it can be applied the financial performance comparison with taxpayers in the same business line, what is called benchmarking. So if the taxpayer prepared this benchmarking report, at least they can prepare defense themselves or explain the condition why it happens. Now, while waiting the implementing regulation, so because this is the keywords also the same business line, whether this is regulated under the same business field classification, KLU, or other measurement to define what is considered same business line. But I think this is the good positive efforts from the government so that at least it's not directly into dispute because the tax office does not like on the loss position, and the taxpayer does not given the chance to defend themselves. Okay, next. So many new things from the international tax. Another one, this is the secondary adjustment of transfer pricing considered as a deemed dividend. This is always also is not regulated before. So let's say that we have the transfer pricing adjustment or dispute, so that it will impact on our profits. There is an adjustment on our corporate income tax. So we thought before that is stop there because the taxpayer has to pay the difference of the profit and then pay the corporate income tax and the penalty on that. But under this new regulation, this is governed clearly. The difference amount of the related party transaction which are not in accordance with the arm's length principle compared with the related party transaction will be considered as deemed dividend. What is the impact of the deemed dividend on the Indonesian tax side? It will be another withholding income tax. So for the illustration, let's say the taxpayer is under tax audit, including the transfer pricing. In Indonesia, tax audit is mixed tax audit, including the transfer pricing audit. So there is an adjustment resulting the additional profit subject to corporate income tax and the penalty, and then the difference also subject or considered as deemed dividend. So it will be another withholding income tax and also the penalty on the interest penalty on the withholding income tax. So this one, yeah, need to pay attention. That is so far on the topic on the rate and the international tax. Now move to the second topic. Second topic is actually called voluntary disclosure program. Well, we just call it tax amnesty 1 and the tax amnesty 2 to make it easier because the spirit almost the same, but there is a bit some difference. Now, the most important is to understand why the government still give the chance, because usually the tax amnesty can be given only after one generation, that is about another 30-40 years later. So that is really too long. That's why this time, because the government wants to promote the voluntary disclosure, so this is called the voluntary disclosure program. What is the background? There are still many taxpayers have not declared all their assets in the previous tax amnesty program. Then if they, under the tax amnesty 1, if the government find out that additional assets, the sanction is 200%. That is considered very high. And then also if the taxpayer wants or willing voluntarily to disclose, because 200%, they will think, oh, okay, just wait and see. So wait and see both sides. And there is also still individual taxpayer do not disclose all their income still on their individual income tax return, IITR, for the year 2016-2020, still given the chance now. And then also due to automatic exchange of information already implemented, taxpayers are given the opportunity to voluntarily carry out their tax obligation. Then even the automatic exchange of information is on the financial and the insurance financial data actually. So the government said that actually the government of Indonesia, they have the data information already from the banks. This is automatic, around IDR 670 trillion, 670 trillion. It's about Singapore dollar 670 billions. And then the indicative of 131,000 taxpayers. And also for the offshore income, that is the indicative of 676 trillions, indicating 50,000 over taxpayers. Based on the findings from AEOE, automatic exchange of information, this is the tax office called data concrete, compared to the tax return that is submitted. So this is the huge potential. So having said that, that's why the government still give the opportunity to voluntarily with the lower rate as well as the of course almost no penalty if the taxpayer voluntarily disclosed by themselves. So having said that, because of the automatic exchange of information, like it or not, every countries voluntarily give the information to other countries. So actually the data information has been there. So it's just for us to really things if we do not follow, and then later on the tax office find out, then another penalty. Okay, next slide. This one, the program will start January 1st to June 2022. That is enough time, 6 months, very generous also. But my advice, better not waiting until the end. The taxpayer may disclose the net asset that have not been or are not disclosed as long as the DGT, the Directorate General of Tax, has not found the data and information regarding the said assets. The net asset is defined the value of asset minus the value of liabilities. So that you have the asset, if you have the liability, can be deducted. So what is being disclosed is the net asset or the net value. Then, well, this one also, you know, to give the peace of mind, better sleep at night. For the individual taxpayer who enjoy voluntary disclosure program to disclose the net asset 2016-2020, shall not subject to tax audit. The same if you follow already the tax amnesty one, also some of us enjoy that already. Rather than being tax audited, this is a lot of headache and you know, it's not peace of mind. Now, what is the rate? And who clarify? Who is qualified for that? Well, you know, we can call it tax amnesty 2, voluntary disclosure program, and then can call it scheme 1, scheme 2. We are talking the same thing. So period of net asset obtained, that is on the scheme 1, January 85 up to 2015. That is the program last time there, but it's still given the opportunity again. And then scheme 2 for the asset acquired 2016 up to 2020. But the difference is on the subject. On the scheme 1, individual and corporate allowed. On the scheme 2, only individual and no corporate allowed. Then the rate. For assets within the Republic of Indonesia and invested in natural resources processing sector and the renewable energy and the state bonds, the rate is 6%. For the scheme 2 or tax amnesty 2, the rate is 12%. If you have the asset in Indonesia, but not invested in that area, specific area, also okay, but a different rate, 8% and 14%. Now, even you have the asset outside of Indonesia at this moment. Let's say that you have, you know, money in the bank offshore, and you want to repatriate, transfer back to Indonesia, and then invest it in the area in the natural resources processing sector, renewable energy, and the state bonds, the rate's still the same, 6% and 12%. And then the same 8% and 14%. Then even if you have assets outside of Indonesia and you don't want to repatriate, it's okay. But the rate is slightly different, 11% and 18%. Okay, so so many choices. Next slide. Now, for the global tax consensus, this is Indonesia is more topic 3. Yeah? Indonesia is more active and become the main global players as well. This is to illustrate the future trend and well, you know, no more place to hide basically because of the technology, and then also this is the new trends. So background is the global tax consensus anticipating the implementation of the G20 and the OECD international agreements for the global minimum tax rates for corporate and tax on digital transactions. And also anticipating the impact of the globe implementation on utilization of tax facilities, tax holiday and super deductions. This is happening that some countries, because they want to attract foreign investment, they give very attractive tax holidays, super deduction, those kind of things. But under this global tax consensus, it's all will be reviewed, and then there is the global consensus how the global play together. And then the implement and anticipating under agreements on the BEPS, base erosion profit shifting, so that this is to limit the conglomerations to shift the profits to the countries that have the low tax jurisdiction, those kind of thing. And then this implementing regulation can be in the form of bilateral as well as multilateral. Okay, next. This is just to give you the timeline for the planning purpose and to give you the trend information. Global Consensus Agreement Plan, it is planned October 2021, which is done. And the signing of the multilateral instruments by jurisdiction that agrees for the global consensus 2022. And also implementation of the global consensus will be regulated on 2023. Okay, next slide. Now, this is very interesting. Overseas taxpayer collection assistance. This is again, there is no place to hide. This is the Minister of Finance has an authority to cooperate with other jurisdictions for assistance in the tax collection. So let's say we are Indonesian tax residents actually. We have the tax outstanding in Indonesia, and then somehow that we are in Singapore. Then the government of Indonesia can ask the Singapore government to chase us, to chase that Indonesian tax resident and to collect the tax. That is also apply the other way around. Let's say the Singapore tax resident, he has the tax outstanding, and then somehow it's not in Singapore. So let's say that he or she is in Indonesia. Then they can ask the government of Indonesia to chase that Singapore tax resident. That is what is called overseas taxpayer collection assistance. So becoming international. Then another thing is this is just a confirmation on the rearrangement on the mutual agreement procedure, MAP. MAP can continue if the dispute in the tax court or the Supreme Court decision are not related with the transaction process of MAP. So that there is a different kind of dispute in the tax court and the Supreme Court. So the MAP can still continue. However, if what is disputed is also disputed in the tax court and the Supreme Court, once this is decided, the MAP is terminated. This is just to repeat. Okay, next slide. This is new. Then the hot topics. I think this is hot topics because, like it or not, this is the background because the increase in the greenhouse gas emission and the risk of climate change. You see that Indonesia consists of so many islands, so like it or not, we have to follow. And the government of Indonesia commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 29%. Mainly, this is driven by the climate change mitigation and the changing of the behavior in the economic activities that have the potential to produce greenhouse gas emission. Well, actually, by this carbon tax, of course, the impact, this will be increase of the cost in the supply chain. Let's say that it start with coal, PLTU, pembangkit listrik tenaga uap. Next slide. So that, of course, if you know the cost is increased at the supply side, then it will go all the way. The price to the end of the consumer will increase. But however, to address that, next slide, please. So that the government of Indonesia tried to introduce slowly, and this is compared to other countries. This is considered very low. The rate only 30,000. That is about $3 per ton. So this is very cheap, low. So this is to have to give enough time for the business people to adapt with this new implementation. So as of April 1st, 2022, the implementation starting with the coal, pembangkit listrik tenaga uap first. Maybe later on we'll go to another industry. Okay. Last but not least, on the custom and excise, if you pay attention, also the government of Indonesia really, very active and the aggressive on the customs and excise law. Changes on the custom and excise law, the same concept, ultimum remedium. Actually, the government of Indonesia interested to collect the tax and the penalty rather than to put people in the jail. So the implementation of the ultimum remedium in criminal offenses on excise for violations of permits, releasing excisable goods, unpackaged excisable goods, and excisable goods originating from criminal acts. On the dispute level, that is two, on the inspection penelitian and investigation penyidikan. Custom law before on the penelitian is not regulated, on the penyidikan 4 times paid excise. On the new regulation, paid 3 times on excise amount and paid 4 times. As long as you pay, no need to go to prison. Thank you all. Thank you.